I think it's going to be the same issue with every large financial firm. At least that's the world in which we operate here in New York, and there is no doubt a challenge that we have in the recruiting environment these days, where a lot of the students don't necessarily understand the opportunities that are ahead of them in the financial community. We are all about recruiting young, talented people, and I think that's the real motivating factor as to why firms, institutions have gotten involved, is because it's a pipeline for well-educated, motivated young people, to join our firms. What I've seen is it's not only one of the most relevant programs I've ever seen in terms of the subject matter and the content that is that we work through during the camps and throughout the whole program, but I think for lack of a better word, there's an intimacy between the volunteers and the kids. You actually get very close to them, which I think is more impactful, and there's a sense of ownership that I think the employees at Citi, and I'm sure it's at a lot of the other volunteering firms, get out of this, and it's a real satisfaction. It was certainly very different than how I spent my years at that level, and it's inspirational. So much has changed in the last 15 years about students' education, and it's getting more and more challenging for students to get into college and get good jobs afterwards. So I think there's a natural evolution that's going on here, but as it relates to something as specific as finance and corporate finance, I think it's very inspirational that these students have picked that as an opportunity for them to learn about. And I think, I've taught a number of classes and advised a number of teams, and every time I do it, I'm shocked and overwhelmed by the questions that I get from them, and most importantly, I'm shocked by the dedication that they have towards their projects. We do have former Youth About Business students working at Citigroup. I think that we are still in the Youth About Business is still in the earlier stages of its life cycle and moving students from the young high school years through college. The evidence is there, and I think that I don't know the exact number, there are a number of firms on Wall Street that are currently employing alumni of Youth About Business. Being in the camp, I spend a lot of time with the kids walking them through the rationale of a particular business transaction. What are the motivating factors for both sides' perspectives? What are the limitations that both parties to a transaction may have? And putting together or formulating a strategy for them to think about as they build their own thesis for doing the transaction. This may entail walking through basic accounting, may walk through basic approaches to valuation. I always start out at the basic level, and they typically take me to a much more complicated level because their tenacity and frankly the level of comprehension that they have already going into it. But it's more about letting the students drive their own agenda about what they want to focus on, and just being there to be flexible and addressing the specific issues that they want to talk about. About 3 years ago, I had a student named Cody Chang, who is from here in New York, goes to school in the downtown area. I don't think I necessarily remembered Cody when I left the camp until it was about a week later when he started to call me and talk to me about certain topics that we covered during the class. That, over the last 2 years, has evolved into regular emails and phone calls with Cody, talking about what he's doing in his high school classes, talking about various businesses that he has actually started up and has done a very nice job of growing, all the way into how does he approach the early admission process for college. and not always are we looked at as people who just come in to talk about finance accounting. There is a bond that forms between the students and the volunteers. There's a mentorship that evolves, and I think that's an example of it, where Cody has kept me up to date with the developments in his life and has asked me for advice on where he should go to college, how he should go about it, what classes he should focus on. I've always been encouraged when I saw the commitment that somebody like Cody Chang has. He has a real desire for success, but with a balanced sense of responsibility, which is something that you very rarely see in kids these days. 2 years ago, I was teaching a valuation session at Columbia for about 50 students. And I was walking through slides and walking them through the very basic fundamentals of valuation. And one concept that we were talking about is determining what a price per share is all about. And this was an environment, probably for my benefit, that I wanted to stick with basic math. And I used the concept of what we call basic shares outstanding. And it was at that time that one student in the back of the class raised his hand and asked me why I wasn't using diluted shares outstanding. And at that point in time, I wasn't sure if I was in front of 10th graders teaching them about valuation, or if I was in the later stages of associate training at a Wall Street investment bank.